Mr. Rushkoff is the author of 11 best-selling books on media and culture, including Siberia, Media Virus, Playing the Future, Coercion, Why We Listen to What They Say, and Get Back in the Box. In addition, he is the author of 2 novels, Ecstasy Club and Exit Strategy, and a graphic novel, Testament, Akeda. He joins us this evening to discuss its sequel, Testament, West of Eden. Rolling Stone has called the book a deeply transgressive work, seriously trippy. So won't you please join me in welcoming Douglas Rushkoff.
Thanks for coming out. So this morning around 4:30 in the morning, our baby started crying from her crib. And we're at this stage where you're supposed to let the baby cry in the crib, because if you go and get the baby out of the crib, then they'll cry again, and they won't stay in their crib. So it's not as violent as this thing called cry it out, where you really make them suffer a while, but it's serious. So my wife and I sit there trying not to go in, because you hear your baby crying and you want to take her out. But we know it's good for her to learn how to self-soothe, is what they call it, from inside her crib, and get herself back to sleep. But her crying escalates until eventually we hear this thud. And I figure she chucked her doll at the crib, because I heard a little whimpering after that, and then she went to sleep. And we couldn't sleep after that because we were worried that maybe she, fell out of the crib. And about half an hour later, my wife finally decides she's going to sneak in the room. She sneaks in the room, the baby's not in the crib. And she looks, and the baby's sleeping on this pile of stuff, this very soft pile of stuff that we, changed her on. And, we look at the crib, and what she did was she took all her animals and she piled them up into this staircase so that she could climb up them and get out of this thing. And she survived, she didn't even have a wound on her, or, a noticeable bump. And for me, that's what the whole book I just been writing is about. It's pretty much the reason even why I wrote this book. It's this comic book, and the reason I decided to get into comics was because I've been really obsessed with panels. That's the boxes that the story generally happens in a comic book. And it seemed to me that more stuff happens between the panels and outside the panels than in the panels themselves. And that, as I see it, life is about learning how to escape the panels, learning how to escape this sort of preset narrative of this very sort of sequential, boxed-in way of understanding our world, and venturing out. That becoming an adult is just what becoming an adult is for our baby. It's learning how, in spite of what your parents say, and all the protests, and all the reasons, and all the dangers that are lurking for you in a toddler's bedroom, it's to be able to go outside that little crib and venture around the world as a 2.5-foot adult. And for me, the Bible was always a story about that. It was about people who tried to break free of sort of the mental slavery of the world in which they live, and to get into this other way of existing, where instead of depending on these nice rectilinear rules that have been made for you, you can step out into the gutter, as we call it in comics, that space between the panels. You can go out into the gutter and make your own rules. And that's really, in a nutshell, what the story of the Torah is. It's these people living in Egypt under very strict rules, living in these death cults, and they pretty much smash the gates of their world by desecrating the gods that they all believe in, I mean, most of us know about the plagues from the Cecil B. DeMille movie with the frogs and the blood and the locusts, and that makes Pharaoh all upset, so he lets them go. Well, what's really going on there is not that they're doing all these nasty plagues to the Egyptian people. What's happening there is that they are desecrating the Egyptian gods. They're desecrating the gods that they've probably been worshiping for the 400 years they've been living in Goshen, in Egypt. You know, blood, the plague of blood desecrates the Nile, which is a god. Locusts desecrate the corn, which is a god. You know, each of the plagues, darkness desecrates the sun, which is a god. And finally, you know, the killing of the firstborn, which is the firstborn civilization, the way you get out of that killing of the firstborn is you're supposed to sacrifice a calf and put the blood on your door. And when are they doing this? In April? Well, the calf-headed god is the god that gets celebrated in April. That's Egyptian New Year. So what these people were supposed to do was take the god that's being celebrated, and instead of worshiping it, they're supposed to kill it and put the blood up on their doors as a big to the gods and the society that they're living in. That's what gets them out. So here's a story of these people that smash their gods, then run out into the desert, and Moses and his father-in-law, this black guy from Midian, completely different culture, this sort of ex-priest, they decide to sort of write laws together, figure out how are we going to live? What are we going to do? What is a better way for human beings to live than in the thrall of this fake Pharaoh god and all these crappy idols? What should we do? And they give themselves Sabbath and ethics, and they decide we're going to live, you know, as they say in Fiddler, to life, l'chaim. You know, we're going to live for life rather than for death. And what would a society that's dedicated to life look like? You know, and how can we negotiate that? That's scary. That's weird. That's evolution in a nutshell. It's saying we are responsible for the evolution of this species as we move through time. And we're not going to be beholden to history and to the old. We're going to be instead progressive. We're going to look at making this world a better place, which is what they keep calling Moshiach and Messiah. You know, how do we bring about social justice? How do we bring about a better world? What I was struck by, as in the last decade or so, as I studied, you know, Jewish history and Christian history and all that, what I've been struck by is how the Bible and the Torah ended up being used for the opposite reasons, right? They're used by some of the most regressive, conservative in the bad sense, racist and nationalist, and polar, really polar, frightened people. And the document itself, this bizarre, mythic, allegorical, pre-Aristotelian narrative, this narrative that doesn't just work with a beginning, middle, and an end, and justice and damned people, and this narrative that works in this completely different way from the crappy stories that now come to us in pretty much every medium we use, you know, that let us sleep at the end and feeling all self-righteous and justified and evil or whatever we are. It works in this weird, open-ended, allegorical way, and I see instead, you know, Torah and Bible are being used as if they're historical documents. You know, oh, it says right here in this part of Genesis that God gave this piece of land to these people at this time, and that's why we deserve the nation state ratified by the United Nations. It's like, what? So this document that I thought was made to break people out of the panel ended up becoming the enforcement of the panel. You know, and most of us, when we think about Bible, we can't help but think about this Bible-thumping person that says, this is what you got to do in there. You know, that the Bible has been, the authority of the Bible has been usurped by the crib makers instead of the crib escapees. And the crib makers mean to keep us infantile. They mean to keep us like children. They mean to keep us unaware. And it works on a lot of different levels. And if I had an infinite amount of time to do this comic, which is actually a monthly comic that then gets collected every 5 or 6 issues into these things they're calling graphic novels, but are really just collections. If I had infinite time, I could cover it from the point of view of feminism. I could cover it from the point of view of the individual versus the collective. I could cover it from any number of different obstacles to this way of understanding the world. But the one I picked, and it's because I think it's the most relevant one today, is economics, is currency. You know, I think that kind of the single worst enemy we have in trying to outgrow, in trying to break free of our idolatry and of trying to become adults is our belief in money. And our belief that money is a real thing, and even worse, our belief that the way our money works is the way money works. We've forgotten that the money we use was based on a very specific set of priorities, that the money we use was really invented during the Renaissance. It's called a centralized currency. The money we use is a kind of money that a leader in the middle who has central authority and a printing press can create and then loan into existence, right? If you want to buy my book, you've got to borrow money from Greenspan or Bernanke or whoever it is. You've got to borrow money from him to give me. You've got to find this scarce resource of money. Now, why is it scarce? It's scarce because they've decided it's scarce. Right? It's not scarce because there's not enough resources. It's not because you don't do enough work. It's not because you don't do something in your life of more than enough value to have one of these. It's that there's something else in our system. So what I was really interested in was sort of how the Torah, how Bible deals with what I'm calling false scarcity. So I look back at the story of Joseph. I mean, and that's where we got it. Joseph, this really smart Jewish kid, right, who sold into slavery and all that, goes to the Pharaoh and says, I understand your dream. This dream you had about 7 big cows and 7 little narrow cows, little skinny cows. Because there's going to be 7 years of abundance, during which you should collect every piece of corn and grain and whatever you can find. Because after that, there's going to be 7 years of famine. And if you've got all the stuff, you're going to be able to sell it, right? You're going to be in charge. And what happens? Well, yeah, he's got all the grain. There's 7 years of famine. People come to the Pharaoh for the grain. First they give him their stuff, give him some money, give him some silver, give him a teapot, whatever they got. They run out of stuff, so what does he do? Joseph comes up with another idea and says, well, look, why don't you get them sort of indentured to you, right? Get them to owe you the money. So now if they owe you the money, they can work it off. It's like when you don't have enough money in the restaurant, have the big meal, just now work as a busboy in the kitchen for the next 8 years. And it was clever. I mean, and it's the same thing. I've been trying to bring myself to buy an apartment in Park Slope. An apartment in Park Slope, a cheap one now, is $1.1 or $1.2 million. Right? Park Slope per square foot costs more than Manhattan Upper West Side. Look at the New York Times real estate. It's right there. This is not a bizarre fact. It's just a true one. And there are banks, I found out from Manhattan Mortgage, there are banks willing to lend me $700,000 or $800,000 so I could buy a 2-bedroom apartment in Park Slope. Now they're not lending it to me because I earn that kind of money. They're lending it to me because they know that I'm the kind of person who, if I've borrowed that kind of money, I'll do whatever it takes to pay it back. Which means not writing comic books and weird Jewish books and doing my strange talks. It means getting a job at Ogilvy and Mather in the account planning department and figuring out how to convince people to buy bad drugs, right, instead of taking tryptophan or whatever. Because they know I'll do what it takes. Because they know how I will respond to being indebted to them. They know I will enslave myself. So, I'm not doing that. Which could mean breaking even my allegiance to this fair city, you know, and finding some other fair city. You know, there's places you can go for like $200,000 or $300,000 and get like this house. It's like, wow, who knew? There's a world outside New York that they don't want to blow up either. I mean, the whole trick though is, you know, you want to get far enough away from New York to not be part of that market mentality, but once you get far enough to that place where you're outside of this and able to afford it, there's these other things that are really scary, right? That's where it's like Jews and blacks and gays, and you get, can have problems too. But there are safe havens for weird people. You just have to find them. So in this comic book, what I decided to do, and I thought would be fun, and just hadn't been done in comics before. I was a big fan of Jack Kirby and all these people who have intense cosmologies in their books, and I'd never seen it done, was to take the regular characters, the characters who are living in sequential time, and put them inside the panels, but then put the gods, and I have many gods in this story. I mean, even the temple I belong to, Beth Elohim, right? It's House of the Gods, right? The Jews knew there were a lot of gods. It's just, we picked one. But there were a lot. There are a lot out there. To put the gods of the story outside the panels. Right? So they're living outside linear time, and our characters are living inside it. And if the gods want to affect what's going inside a panel, what's going on in there, if they try to shove their hand in there, then right where the panel wall is, their hand will be like fire or water or some element, because they can't affect it directly, but they can affect it kind of elementally. So it's been fun to play with that. And what I'm working on is sort of the modern allegories to these Bible stories, so people can see that what makes the Bible so relevant is not as the Bible's current preachers would tell us. It's not because this stuff really happened at some moment in history. It's because this stuff is happening now. It's because this stuff happens at every moment in history and on every level. It happens personally, it happens on a family level, it happens on a community level, it happens on a national level, and it happens on a global level. And it happens on a feminist level, it happens on a spiritual level, it happens on a drugs level, it happens on a political level. That it cross-sections through everything. But if you think this is real, that this really happened, you kind of lose access to the allegory. If you need this thing to be true, then you can't argue about what it means anymore. It doesn't mean anything. It just means what it is. It just happened. So I'm trying to break that by telling a modern story about people who are living in this world where they're attempting to create a global currency, where instead of using money, you have an RFID tag, sort of an easy pass, inserted into your arm, and then this can allow you to then get free downloads onto your iPod, and you just swipe it when you're going to places, and if you use it, you get points. It's like this super credit card that's in you, but it can also be used to track you, because there's a big draft going on to get people to fight in the way expanded Persian Gulf War. So if you want to participate in the society financially, you've got to also then participate militarily, and then that became a great metaphor for sacrificing our children. So instead of slaying the firstborn, which is what happens a lot in the Bible, people then have to just stick a chip in their kid, which then makes them, vulnerable to the draft, which is sort of our equivalent of sending children off to the slaughter for the false gods of, oil or dollar-denominated energy. And I'm also dealing with, at the same time, what I see as our energy crisis, which I don't believe, or our oil crisis, which leads to wars and all that, which I don't think is a technological problem at all, but an economic problem. It's not that we don't have the ability to create technologies for renewable energy, it's that we don't know how to charge for them. We don't know how to charge for something that's in abundance. We don't know how to value something that's in abundance. So if we had abundant energy, what happens to 15 of the top 40 Fortune whatever they are companies in this world, and the very wealthy people who run them? We're screwed. The Bible has its problems too, of course. I mean, certainly in its current form, just the utter repression of women and the sort of negation of the abundance cults, the feminine archetypes and abundance cults that predated monotheism. They weren't quite integrated. So part of the reason for calling this Testament is to kind of retell the Bible in a way where it can work out in a better way than just invading Canaan and killing every man, woman, and child. Which just doesn't seem like the most progressive approach to having a great idea. It's not about annihilation of those who don't believe. So eventually I'm going to have the gods sort of demand that, in their final plague, that everyone who has a chip has to be killed. I want our characters to basically be like, that's a little Old Testament for us. You know, do we have to really just kill everybody? That's, you know, and that's what got a lot of people in the Bible got in trouble for not killing every last one. But it's a fun thing, and the comics world has been a terrifically fun and collaborative place to write. I mean, nothing against the New York literary scene. I'm sure there's writers here, but it's kind of a cutthroat scarcity model, intellectual Las Vegas that we're living in here, where people go to parties and you share an idea, and oh, is that in your book? Because maybe I'll put it in mine, or get it to my agent before you do, or I can frame it better. There's a real scarcity model towards literature. It's like, who wrote that article? Does he have dibs on that? In comics, it's funny, I came up with this idea. I wanted to do, I was at the Comic-Con in San Diego, and I got this idea to do a Superman arc of Superman versus Deepak Chopra. Kind of this evil Deepak Chopra guy, though. And we don't know if Deepak Chopra is good or evil yet. Or I don't. But let's just say there's an evil version of him, right? And I was talking about that with some comics guys, and they were giving me ideas on how to develop that story. Right? They were coming up with ideas and giving them away and helping me work on it. Now, that's not something that happens at a New York authors party. It's almost, what happens at a New York authors party is people sort of poo-poo the idea and then go off with their own version of it and try to sell it before you're out of the gate. And go, oh, did you mention that? I don't remember that conversation. Who are you again? Yeah. So the comics world has been a great place for an aging and cynical author, and also one who's been through kind of the ringer of modern American Judaism to find a wealth of true dedicated geeks who love what they do enough to want to see other people do it well. You know, and that's just so rare. It was just and refreshing to find that it's a medium I'm planning to do some other things in, really just for that vibe. And the relationship of readers to writers in comics is very different, because kind of everybody who reads comics writes comics on a certain level, you know, or lives them, which is even kind of more cool. But it's been a fun world to have been welcomed into. And I guess they welcome everybody is the thing, you know? It's like finding that table in the junior high school cafeteria where finally it's like, oh, there are freaks at this junior high school. You know, it's like finding that table. That's sort of what comics has been. I mean, it's not going to pay the way that, you know, intellectual Las Vegas of Manhattan can pay. But it pays something else, and it's a matter of keeping your eyes, I think, on that prize. That's what it is for me. There's another book here. It's funny, I wrote this other book called Get Back in the Box, which was my attempt to infect business, the business community, with the same memes, with the same ideas. Basically to tell people, and it's turning out to be true, but telling American business people, and this sounds weird that you'd have to say this, but telling American business people that the way to be successful at what they do is to actually learn about and enjoy what they do. Does that sound shocking to you? It's shocking to them. And believe me, I get paid a lot to go to businesses now and tell them this. But this is a world in which the CEO of The Gap, I watched his press conference on his first day on CNBC. The CEO of The Gap said, I've never had any experience in the garment business. I know nothing about this. And he says that proudly, because he's an expert in marketing. He's the expert in how to get Sarah Jessica Parker to be in their commercials. And of course, The Gap is tanking. They finally got rid of this guy just a couple of weeks ago. And one of the articles about getting rid of this guy said, oh, and Doug Rushkoff and Get Back in the Box called this guy out. And it's like, yay, someone. But the problem is that most businesses have this real Renaissance era understanding of how business is done. They think that the way to run a business is to sort of build up walls and hide the thing that they're doing, and then put up like posters on those walls that brand what they're doing, right? And the branding statement about what they do and what they actually do have nothing to do with each other, because actually in those walls is nothing but a spreadsheet, right? What they do is they outsource to China or to Korea or to Singapore. Nobody in the business actually understands the business anymore. They're all just sort of this giant swath of middle managers just pushing around money and inventory and wanting to talk to marketers about how to feel cool about what they do. But they all, I mean, when feet hit the carpet in the morning to go to work, they're not going to do the thing that their company does. And the great thing about going to some of these companies is you meet a CEO who 20 years ago actually was involved in that thing, and then remembers, oh right, I used to make shoes. That was really fun. But the last 20 years haven't been fun. It's like, well, why haven't they been? Well, we got bought by this big thing, and then they put me in management, and, well, do you want to make shoes again? Yeah, wouldn't that be great? I'd love to make shoes. Well, you're a millionaire, right? You know, can't you just go make, wow, no, I don't know. But they can. They can go make shoes. They can go actually do the thing they do and have fun at it. But what they need to do to be able to do that is to, again, is to adopt this sort of abundant perspective. They have to believe that their best ideas and their best work is ahead of them rather than behind them. If you think the best thing you've done is behind you, then hey, then you're going to have to spend the rest of your life protecting that secret of what you did. If you think the best stuff that you're going to do is ahead of you, then you can pretty much give away everything you've done before, and you know you're going to be fine because you're the guy who's innovating this stuff for the future. You know, and same with companies. You know, these companies that, again, they keep trying to protect their secrets and protect their employees and prevent people from talking. They don't realize that their employees are the culture. You know, what makes a company cool is that you know people who work there, or you've met them online and they do this cool thing. So it's a matter of these guys, and it's really hard if they have shareholders, if they have stocks and all these people to answer to, and they have to grow every quarter by this amount. I mean, they are so screwed. They are as screwed as Pharaoh and Joseph because they're stuck in that same scarcity model that was created then. They are all debt. I mean, look at any big company out there, even the companies that look maybe fun, you know, like media companies, Sony, Time Warner, all these big companies. What those names are, what Time Warner is a name on a big pile of debt. That's what it is. All these people like you and me on our 401k plans have these stocks in these companies. Those stocks, when you add them all up, are worth billions more than anything that company can ever do. You know, what is it, P&E, or 40 times this of next year's earnings and blah, blah, blah. It's this weird inflated number that means really nothing. And that's why they're so stuck. So if you do get successful, don't sell out. And I don't mean don't sell out, don't make crappy stuff. Make crappy stuff if you like crappy stuff, right? Make cheese. You know, Steven Spielberg, whatever, at his worst, loves what he's doing, right? All these awful shows, the people who write them, I've met them, they love it. They love it. That's fine. Do shit, you know, the head of the class, whatever it is. If you like doing that. Selling out means literally selling what you do to someone else so that you're no longer doing it. But now you work for someone you're working for an investment company, you know, and that's something really different. And it's really, there are going to be a lot of times in life, if you have any measure of success at what you do, you are going to be invited time and time again to get out of that bus that you're on, to get off that bus, and they're going to wave bags of money or a house or this or that to just get off that bus. Just stop doing that. And I know you climbed out of that crib, but get back in this little crib that we made for you. Right? Get in this crib and it's all nice, it's got all this stuff, and you're going to have a car, and we'll give you this pretty girl, and you know, it's all going to be sweet. It's not. It's someone else's crib. You know, and the longer you can hang on, you know, the longer you can hang on to your adulthood before regressing back to that seemingly safe childlike state, the longer you get to live with the real wonder of adulthood. And it's a scary place to be, but there are others out there. There are other people out there who are thinking, who are active, who actually care about the way the world is going to be. Don't believe what you see on the news. Don't believe that America is just this awful, stupid place with horrible people who vote for Bush. I mean, you didn't win either time anyway, right? That's not what's going on here. Right? That's not the majority of people, and even the ones who are voting that way, they don't really realize what they're doing, right? They've been fooled. They're not bad. They're not bad people. They're just confused. And the more of us that kind of step out and just live in the way that we actually believe, the more confidence we'll give them to do the same thing. So do that in any way you can, wherever you're working, whatever you're doing, you know. And that's from the sales clerk at American Apparel, who can change your life if you're open to it. And they can change your life. You know, you just interact with people in that open way, and you're going to find You find more others when you're open to it, walking down the street than you would ever have believed are there. You don't have to search out these gurus on the hill. They're not it. Most of them, if they've gotten up on the hill, it's so over for them anyway by then. You know, it's everybody else that's wise. And they're here. They're in abundance too. They really are. Okay, that's probably enough of an intro. I can't, because you could do that on, you know, you could see that on YouTube, right? Probably tomorrow. You know, you don't come to a live event to see someone talk behind a microphone. You come to interact with me and each other. So let's do that. Are there thoughts? And yeah, let's just talk. Anything is fine. There's no holds barred. And you can be mean if you want to. Mean is fine. If you feel it, right? If you feel it. If you're angry, it's all right. Okay. But if you're not really angry, then you can't be mean.
What better indentured servitude than student loans? I mean, I'm going to be paying those off with interest rate right now. I will be paying those off for a very long time. I'm stuck in a job that I hate. I can't quit it because I need to pay off my loans so I can achieve what I want, you know, a happy life with my girlfriend, wherever. So that's also something that America's used, because our education is probably the highest in the world in cost, and the readily availability of all public and private universities. I mean, you can pay
by the balls, right? And education loans, even if you go bankrupt, you still owe them. You know, those you carry, so they don't let you out of that. It's interesting, they say that we're living in a country without inflation now. But if you look at the things that you need to buy in order to change your class status in this country, which is a change of neighborhood or education, those things have been inflating tremendously. So the class mobility is prohibited when you can't get into the neighborhood or into the school without going into that kind of debt. I mean, it's interesting. Education is a real problem for those who would maintain power structures the way they are. I mean, guys like Marx were really into education. Well, if you just get everybody educated, that's great. I mean, and basically what happens is, I mean, and the radical right understands this, that a truly educated person, someone who gets educated in the liberal arts, is a leftist by definition, right? They're a leftist by definition. Even if they're right-wing in their politics, they're a leftist by definition because they've learned how to consider things, right? They've learned how to actually think, right? And if you know how to think, then on some level you are a Marxist, right? That's basically, if you want to read the shorthand version of Adorno, is if you can think, you're on your way to getting it, right? It's because we live in a society that's telling us not to think, and you can buy great books, you know, by smart, well-educated guys with, you know, who paid off their loans, you know, whether it's, you know, Blink, you know, by Malcolm Gladwell. It's great. You can read these great books that basically say people don't have to think, that people make their choices instinctually, in the blink of an eye, based on these old reptilian impulses. I mean, they reduce humanity to that, which makes marketers feel much better about manipulating people on this level, because, well, they're just a bunch of reptiles, right? Thinking with self-interest. People don't think that way. People might choose between Coke and Pepsi that way. But you really don't choose your mate that way. You don't choose where you're going to live. You don't choose what you want to do. You don't choose what book you want to spend 10 hours reading that way. That's not the way human nature works, except when we're at, like, orange level terror alert. You know, it's at those moments that people start to think that way, when we're kicked down into survival mode. The problem with education, and the Renaissance kings and queens realized this, that era realized it as they were erecting their universities. The problem with education is people who get educated get smart. And people who are smart don't transfer parental authority onto leaders as easily, right? So what they decided was to create the disciplines. Read Bucky Fuller on this, it's great. Operating Manual for Spaceship Earth. It's really short, but he pretty much explains that the disciplines were created so that nobody would know everything. The kings and queens of the 14th and 15th century were really threatened by people called the Great Pirates. And these were these guys who had boats and could navigate the world and who could speak a lot of languages and who understood how stars worked and understood currency. They could go do, excuse me?
The Templars.
The Templars, the Knights, who understood how to do a whole bunch of stuff. And what they decided was, why don't we create institutions that lets anybody learn a whole lot about one thing? So we'll let this guy from the time he's 15 to the time he's 30 learn everything there is to know about astronomy. And this guy can learn about boat navigation. And this guy can learn about economics, but then they've all got to come through me to actually do the thing they do, because I'm the only one who has access to all these different pieces of knowledge. You know, and that was a great method of social control. The problem today is, and this is why there's all these sort of organizations out there to stop hiring of so-called lefty teachers or anti-American, anti-patriotic teachers, and people went on, they sort of go on witch hunts against leftists, to some extent. I mean, and yes, the universities are greatly populated by leftists. I was taught James Joyce by a leftist. I mean, to see Marxist interpretations of Ulysses is, I don't know if that was useful or not, but they're out there and they can get nauseating. But the other way to do it, of course, is if education is so expensive that the only way to get one is to be a member of the privileged class who already has a stake in maintaining their privilege. So you can educate them and it's fine. They're going to go to Morgan Stanley and do the things that get them the $1 zillion bonuses and whatever. They're going to be on the team. Or to take those regular people with the high SAT averages that you need in your school to make it a good school. You got to bring in some of them, but you've got to charge them so much for the privilege of doing it that in the 10 years after that school they will become one of you. That you're going to have one of those jobs. I was offered one of those jobs, a job at Citibank, when I was just a weird little cyber guy. I was offered this job for a lot of money at Citibank. And I figured it out that with all the, whatever they give you, these option things, I could have had like $1 million in 2 years. And my mom was like, you're crazy not to do this. Just 2 years and you'll be a millionaire? But it's like, what if I met the woman who I decided to marry in those 2 years? She met this guy who's making $1 million. Does she want that guy when he's not making $1 million? And what if you know what I mean? Will she still, or then do I have to still be that person? Or can I say, yes, I'm this person now, but I'm not really this person? What do you mean you're not really this person? You are this person, right? Don't worry, you'll fall in line. It's cool. You're cool, don't worry. You're cool. You can still do comments on the side. Keep your job. I want my Central Park West apartment, thank you. Or I could do this for 2 years and then get hit by a bus the day that I quit, right? And then that was it. And then that was it. Then I blew it. You've got to operate as if you could get hit by a bus any day, right? There is no necessarily no tomorrow. So I didn't. And thus I don't have a townhouse in Park Slope. I'm on my way to Cincinnati. But, which is a good town, right? Anybody here from Cincinnati?
We have time for about 1 or 2 more.
Oh my gosh. All right, we're going fast. Ma'am.
Mr. Rushkoff, congratulations on your knowledge and your intelligence and your fortitude sitting there writing all these books. What kind of food do you eat?
What kind of food do I eat? Food? Oh. Humans. I cannibalize.
Tell me, are you a vegetarian and you eat steaks?
No, I'm a guilty meatitarian. I was a vegetarian for like 6 years and got increasingly tired over those 6 years. And if I don't have a little animal protein, a little fish or chicken or a steak once a month, nothing gets done. Right? It really doesn't. So yeah, I'm a reluctant. What's that new book? Doesn't someone do that? The Reluctant Meatophobe or whatever it is?
The Omnivore's Dilemma.
Yeah, the Omnivore's Dilemma. I'm smack dab in the middle of the Omnivore's Dilemma. But no, the thing is, and this is, I will admit this, I'm not. Oh, they're shooting, but I'll admit it anyway. I'm not as smart as I appear to some. I'm not. I'm an open-minded lateral thinker. So what I can do is I can recognize patterns, right? I can see, oh, this is like that. And that's not that hard to do if you're not afraid to see them. The worst is I go through months at a time of extreme disillusionment. Extreme disillusionment. I write this book celebrating what Judaism has to offer the world. Right? It's not everything. Right? Judaism's not everything, but it offers some interesting ideas, and certainly Jewish text, some great ideas. then I just get named in this paper by the American Jewish Committee, which used to be, when I was growing up, the mainstream big Jewish sort of philanthropy clearinghouse. I get named along with like Tony Kushner and some great writers of being an anti-Semite and calling for the extinction of the Jews. And that's a bummer. Maybe I could. I wouldn't win. You know, I wouldn't. Just if I could sue, I wouldn't win. But on the one hand, I can bum out about that, which I did for a while, and then I can go, well, what it actually means is they need me more than ever, right? It means that things have gotten serious, that they're that out of touch, that it's important that there be someone around, so 1,000 years from now, when they look back, if we're all still here, we're not us, but someone, when they look back at this time and they say, oh my God, look what these mainstream Jews were up to at that moment in history, they go, oh yeah, but look, there was this guy saying this, and there was Tony Kushner saying that, and there was Michael Lerner saying, there were people around who knew what was going on, and that is my sort of pessimistic option on what we do. If this is a dark age, if it really is just as awful as sometimes it seems, at least we should leave behind evidence and clues that we continued the inquiry through this time, that during this bizarre, strange, dark time, there were people involved. There were people thinking. And to leave, for future generations some clues on how to find their way back. How to find their way back to conscious living, which is not as bad as all that. And that's really what they're arguing. That living consciously is too painful, too horrible, this blinding light. That's my problem with most spiritual paths. They're like, oh, if you go on this path, you're going to see the earth-shaking horror of enlightenment. One, there's no such thing as enlightenment. And two, there's no real earth-shaking horror. It's just start, if you want to be enlightened, start now. Declare it so, right? You're enlightened. Boom. I declare it as my Rushkoff Shakti pot at you all. Anyone who wants to be is officially, that's what the S training was about too, right? Did you get it? Did you get it? That was what the S training, it was a good idea. A used car salesman says, I'm not really selling cars to these people. What I'm selling is this sense of fulfillment. So why don't I just sell that? Right? So I'm not even selling, I'm giving it away. It's in abundance, right? So if you start there, it's a lot easier to take these bumps in the road and just say, it's okay, all right, this is a crazy time, people are nuts, but I'm going to continue to leave traces, leave clues, and leave clues. The reason you do art, the reason you do a book, is you create something that seems valuable enough to be preserved. That's why artists are really smart. You're real painter artists, because people, if you have real skill at it, you create this artifact that people then save in their homes, right? Or a record, or a song, or something, or a poem. People keep it, and they keep it for the years required for it to reach a generation that can get it, and into which it can finally unfold. If you don't put care and precision into what you do, then it won't be saved. And then it may not reach your audience.
Rushkoff, you said it didn't know a lot. And your brain could be left to scientists.
It's sweet. I joke, but thank you. It's very sweet. I'll leave my brain to anyone who wants it after I'm done with it. I promise. But it's not, I'll sign books. But really, it's not a matter of knowing a lot. It's just a matter of pretty much sharing everything you know, not holding on to it. It makes room. No hard drive, all RAM. That's how to live. Okay, thanks a lot.
For coming. We're going to be starting a line for the first couple of rows first to border on and here. But again, I just want to have a nice round of applause.